Hey, we have Dr. Thomas Boyd in the house this morning to talk to us about melanoma. Yeah, from North Star Lodge. Good morning. Good morning, Shannon from
Good
Memorial
morning.
Hospital.
Yeah, we got through that really hot stretch.
Yeah.
But we've still got a lot of summer ahead.
That's
so
right.
it's good to have Dr. Boyd here to talk about staying safe in the sun.
Yeah, definitely. Well, how many people get skin cancer? A lot of people get skin cancer. Probably don't even know it, right? As they start to see the signs. But good morning. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Good morning.
What's skin cancer? I mean, it's very serious. Got to take it seriously. But a lot of people, they forget the sunscreen and all the stuff to protect them, right?
You bet. And skin cancer certainly is a sort of a growing epidemic as we age. Folks who are over 40, over 50 have had a lot of cumulative sun exposure. And so not only melanoma, but things like basal cell cancer and squamous cancer also occur in those sun-exposed areas. But melanoma is the one that sort of has the bad reputation as a more aggressive cancer, and so we like to point that out. But the same behaviors that'll reduce the risk of melanoma can help reduce the risk of basal cell cancers and squamous cancers as well. As we talked about earlier, you'd like to avoid the midday sun is probably the worst because there's the least protection from the atmosphere. You get more UV radiation that way, and if you can limit your exposure to early and late in the day, that's going to be a good thing. And it's probably especially good for younger folks, young children. The last thing they need is a sunburn at age 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, and so forth.
Yeah.
Those are the folks that may be set up for melanoma later in life. So avoiding exposure when we're younger is a especially good idea. It's hard to get back what you've already been exposed to, unfortunately.
Yeah, no kidding. The seriousness of melanoma is the spread, is it not, as it moves into other organs?
Well, it can be a more aggressive cancer. The other cancers I mentioned tend to sort of stay localized to the skin, so in many cases you can take care of them even if you miss them the first time around. With melanoma, they can sometimes leapfrog into lymph nodes or distant sites, and people can come in for their first visit with a melanoma and already have disease that's widespread. Now, that's not common. Most of the time, if we pick up a melanoma early, we find 95 to 98% of people are going to be cured if they identify the melanoma at a fairly early stage. So it's important to recognize it. So any changes in the skin, any unusual pigmentation in skin lesions, or a lump that doesn't make sense. A few melanomas don't have the dark coloration that's associated with many melanomas. So any skin lesion that just isn't behaving normally or starting to grow should get your attention and get you into the doctor.
You know, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4" and 250 plus, and there's a lot of me I can't see.
Exactly.
So I'm reminded of those great wildlife movies where the chimps are kind of going over each other. Is that what we need to do with each other? I mean, how do we...
Certainly there are a few unusual sites that we've had folks experience melanoma, and it's a challenge because the ones that tend to get missed are where you can't, as you said, you can't see your back. Sometimes in the scalp. We've had folks of Scandinavian descent who are sun worshippers when they're young, and lo and behold, they get a melanoma in the scalp because the lighter colored hair doesn't protect them from that sun exposure. We sometimes get melanomas between the toes, which you'd say, well, gee, there isn't a lot of sun there, but they still can develop in limited sun-exposed areas. Sometimes under the toenails, you'll say, hey, I must have bruised my toe, and it looks all dark, and it doesn't go away, and occasionally we'll see melanomas in unusual locations. So that's why it's important to contact your doc or care provider or dermatologist if you do see something that's behaving unusually on the skin.
Does it make sense to get a baseline visit with a dermatologist if you're 45 or so, and have them kind of go over you with a fine-tooth comb, and then...
I think it's probably more realistic to see your family doctor and say, especially if you have a history of melanoma in the family, or if you've been a truck driver and held your arm out the window most of your life, those areas are going to have a lot more sun exposure. So if you have a particularly high risk, you may want to, or if you have a family history of basal cell cancers or melanomas, you may want to plug in with a dermatologist. But if it's as an otherwise unremarkable family history, I would probably suggest just checking in with your family doc. And then if you have friends or family, look at your back or look at your scalp where you can't see very easily.
I had an ex-girlfriend notice a spot on the back of my neck that turned out to be a basal cell situation.
Sure.
Should I reestablish my my with her?
There we go. Yeah, maybe the least expensive provider you're going to find.
You're not suggesting that or anything. But no, I really did. It was weird. I couldn't see it. It was right square in the back of my neck.
And that's an example of the basal cells, and those actually do run kind of in parallel as far as locations on the body as melanomas. They're both sun exposed.
Yeah, a lot of
areas of the
sunburns
skin.
as a kid on a farm. You bet.
Exactly.
So sunscreen,
and well, that and also protective layers. You want to, if you can cover up to some degree, that's very helpful. Big, broad brimmed hats will help limit exposure to the head and the back of the neck. A lot of people have the sort of extended hats that cover the back of the neck. That's a great idea because, as you say, you can't.
French Foreign Legion looking
There
flaps
you go.
and stuff.
There
Yeah.
you go. So, and I suppose just to tie it in with the news, it's sort of the same story as Pluto. Pluto has that nice big heart on it. Well, it's because it's so far from the sun, it doesn't get a lot of exposure. And that's probably the motto we ought to have today is be like Pluto, not like Mercury, and avoid the sun exposure.
No kidding. So if we do get this, though, what's the seriousness and the treatments that are available to us?
Well, if you notice the skin change, contact your family doctor. If you're seeing a dermatologist, contact them. And then those can be taken care of pretty readily. And distinguishing between some of the more serious skin cancers and benign lesions is something they do all the time. A very limited surgery is often all that's required if you have a melanoma caught in an early stage. More advanced stages may require more involvement by a general surgeon, often will involve removing regional lymph nodes to identify if there's any spread of the cancer. And certainly there's been some great advances in treating melanoma, but it's a lot like it's always better to have an ounce of prevention than a pound, or these days a ton of cure, because the expense of these very, very elegant treatments is great as far as how they work, but they still are very expensive. So if you can avoid the melanoma in the first place, I think we're all better off.
And a lot of folks won't. We see that stats show that 73,000 cases of types of skin cancer for this year for the nation. 3.5 million basal. And what is a squamous cell, by the way?
Squamous cell is the normal skin cells are actually squamous epithelium is what it's termed, and so that's the biggest portion of your skin is covered with squamous cells, and those can turn into cancers as well. They're probably the least threatening of the common skin cancers, but you don't want to ignore them either.
Sure.
So that's why if you have something that changes, sometimes you can't tell the difference just by looking at it.
I get squeamish talking about squamous.
There you go. There you go.
Guys, appreciate your time this morning. So the bottom line, cover up, check yourself, and use your skin sunblock products, and just be aware that the Yakima Valley Sunshine, for all the good that it does and brings, is a medical consideration to take seriously and do what we can do, right?
Exactly. So I'd rather see you guys out biking at dusk than laying in the sun in midday.
Fair enough. Dr. Boyd, thanks very much. Shannon, any last words?
You've got it covered.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
Fox News starts now.